What's happening, YouTube? It's Simon466cards, and today we're creating two hobby Mount Rushmores. The first one is the hobby Mount Rushmore of universal approval, and the second one is the hobby Mount Rushmore of controversial figures. This has been an idea that I've been kicking around for the past 2 months or so, and I recently discussed the idea when it was still in its infancy stages when I was on the Because I'm Carlos YouTube channel. And you can see I did a 2-hour interview here. We did a sit down. We talked about all sorts of things, including the hobby Mount Rushmore. And at that point in time, I had 3 of the 4 people for the universal approval. If you want to see more, and this is again 2 hours long, so if you want to hear me talk about a lot of things, I will include it in the description below. But thank you to Carlos for having me on. Anyways, back to this. I had 3 of the 4 universal approval people figured out, but I couldn't figure out the 4th. And friend of the channel, Neo Cards and Comics, said, this is pretty obvious. It should be Dr. James Beckett. I don't know why I didn't have him in my list of 4. It seems pretty obvious in hindsight now, but yeah, anybody who talks about him talks about him in a very positive and glowing way because of all he's done for the hobby, whether it's the Beckett magazines back in the 90s, the grading company that obviously in recent times has struggled a little bit, but that has nothing to do with him, or the work he's done around moving the hobby forward with things like what is the definition for a rookie card? What are the criteria for a rookie card? Like things like that, just basics that we take for granted today. He had a big hand in developing that. So that's why Dr. Beckett is on the universal approval Mount Rushmore for the hobby. And I think that one is pretty straightforward. Second is Chris Sewell, baseball card collector, investor, dealer, in that order. Hopefully I got that one right. But he is on here because his content is very wholesome. And when you watch his videos, you see that he just has this love of cards and passion for collecting cards. Sorting cards it seems like something he just loves to do. And his down-to-earth approach to videos is really just nice to watch. When you watch his videos, it just feels like you're sitting down with a nice guy who's going to talk to you about cards for the next 10, 15, 20 minutes or whatever, right? And so, again, like Dr. Beckett, I can't think of anybody who would have a negative thing to say about Chris here. So that's why he is on my Mount Rushmore of universal hobby approval. Moving on to the next person. You might not know his face, but this is Ryan from GemRate, and I will just state right off the bat that I am friends with Ryan, and I think he's one of the nicest guys in the hobby because I've hung out with him at the past few nationals. So I am not fully objective on this one, but he is the person that runs GemRate. And so I'll just ask you this. Have you used GemRate or GemRate data in the past few years? Have you looked at a universal pop report? Have you looked at grading numbers for the past month or 6 months or a year for the 4 grading companies? Have you looked at the literal name of the company, GemRates, of a particular card? Because if you have used his data and his website. And my question for you then is, you've used his stuff. How much have you paid for it? And the answer is you've paid nothing, because he doesn't charge a dime for any of that stuff. So that's why, to me, based off of just that alone, he should be on the hobby Mount Rushmore of universal approval. He could very easily charge you for that data and probably make a good amount of money for it, but he doesn't. He makes it available to the everyday collector. All you need is an internet connection, and that's it. And all this data, tons and tons of data you can use in all sorts of ways, which I've included on the channel, that is fully available to you. He's moving the hobby forward by making data readily available for collectors, investors, whatever you want to call yourself. That is what he's doing for the hobby. He is bringing transparency of data that was previously hidden and just a big black box. You had no idea unless you did a ton of work of how many cards were being graded at each of the various companies and what the gem rates are, and how many cards were being graded at each company each month, and where they were stacking up month to month over month, year over year, that kind of stuff, right? The stuff he's done and the fact he's given away for free, I don't know how you could argue about him being on the Hobby Mount Rushmore of universal approval. Shout out to Ryan. And then lastly, the fourth person is someone who is no longer in the hobby, but he is SGC Pete. The way he built SGC up from the beginning of the pandemic till they got bought out by collectors, to being the clear number 2 when at the beginning of the pandemic, I would say he was the clear number 3. And the scale in which he moved to move their grading numbers up. Ironically, you could have seen that from looking at the gem rate data on a monthly or an annual basis. The way he was able to do that while also focusing on the customer experience and making sure that customers were treated well and fairly and given the attention that other grading companies frankly don't give to their customers is why he was so universally beloved, that he was able to build up this brand that became the clear challenger to PSA until they were bought up by collectors. And so to me, he almost gets grandfathered into this list or to this Mount Rushmore because of the work that he has done, even though he obviously is probably sipping on a nice drink on an island somewhere with his payout when he left collectors. And so to SGC Pete, I say we're thankful that you were here. Rest in peace, my good friend. Obviously, even though he is alive and well. And so those are the 4 members of my Hobby Mount Rushmore of universal approval. If you have any other names that you think should have been on this Mount Rushmore, let me know in the comment section down below. And I'm sure there are people that I might have included if I thought of them, but these were the 4 that came to mind, or I suppose 3 that came to mind. And then again, thanks to Neo Cards and Comics for the Dr. Beckett suggestion. Now, let's get a little controversial. Oh, before we do that, you saw the fun graphics there. I normally use PowerPoint for work. And as a result of that, when I create my slides that I share with you on the screen, I have been doing it from a very work format perspective. But I was playing around with PowerPoint the other day and I found some wacky transitions. So you'll be seeing more of those next time that I use PowerPoint for my videos. And if you're new to the channel and you have not subscribed, feel free to hit that subscribe button to see what fun transitions are in the future. There are some wild ones out there. Anyways, let's move on. The Hobby Mount Rushmore of controversial figures is something the way that I'm creating it is, it can't just be someone who is like clearly not a good person and has no people on their side. For someone to be controversial in my mind, it needs to be someone who has people on their side and the people who are not on their side. Like they have to be a pro and a con, right? You can't just be like the card porn guy where there's like literally no person who would be on that guy's side. It has to be someone who is at least, if not 50-50, then at least like 10-90, let's say. So having said that, the first member of the Hobby Mount Rushmore of controversial figures to me is fairly obvious. It is Jeff Wilson of Sports Card Investor and of Cards HQ at this point. To me, he's done a lot of good for the hobby, but also some of the stuff he says is kind of ridiculous at times. And I know a lot of people like to pick at him for his predictions that may or may not have come out to be true. I care less about that because if you make the amount of content that he does, you're not going to be right 100% of the time. Like that's just impossible. Like I have made predictions in my videos that have been wrong, and I'd like to think quite upfront about predictions that have been wrong or mistakes that I've made, what have you. And so to me, he's on this list. I would say I think that Jeff has done more good than harm for the hobby, but I totally understand why you might think otherwise. So he is my first and it's almost obvious figure on this controversial figure list of people from the hobby. Now, as we go through this list, I am also going to show you something about the person that might just enrage you a little bit if you don't like this person, just for my own personal amusement. And I mean, just saying Jeff's name and mentioning him in some kind of way, whether it's the fact that it's in this video or putting him on the thumbnail, will enrage people and get people going in the comment section. So let's just see what I dug out about Jeff Wilson. It is that he has his own Wikipedia page. You can see here, Jeff Wilson, career sports card investor, books, trading card, YouTube, and media presence. He has his own Wikipedia page. So comment section, pop off about that if that upsets you. Next up, I think is also fairly obvious. It is Michael Rubin, and he's here because he's part of the Fanatics hobby takeover. He's gonna monopolize the card licenses for baseball, basketball, and football. And so while there are many detractors who think a hobby monopoly is a bad idea and that he is going to ruin the hobby and yada, 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 there are those, including myself, who think that a lot of the stuff that he's doing is very much needed and will grow the hobby. And I'll be quite honest, I think a lot of the ideas that he has done or is going to do make a lot of business sense. And some of them even, I would say, are quite smart and brilliant. Some of which I agree with, and some of which I agree with and would not have come up with myself. And so for that, he is on my controversial figures list for the hobby Mount Rushmore. But obviously there are people who do not like the way that he has taken over the hobby. Now, what is the weird thing about him, or the strange thing about him that I found on the internet? Well, it is the fact that on eBay, you can buy a Michael Rubin life-size cutout. I have no other words to describe this other than the fact that this is real. You can see this is actually eBay. I'm on the Canadian version of the website, but I'm sure if you Googled Michael Rubin casual life-size cutout on the US version, you could also get this delivered to your home. So if you despise Michael Rubin with the passion of 1,000 suns, you can buy this cutout and throw daggers at him to get your rage out, or a baseball bat, or darts, or whatever your weapon of choice may be. Perhaps that'll be the solution to your Michael Rubin hate. So there we go. Fanatics, Michael Rubin on my list of contra figures in the hobby. Next up is Rick Probstein from the Probstein 123 consigner that exists on eBay. And he's on this list because it seems like he has a lot of friends in the hobby, but there are people who are very anti-Probstein and anti-Rick because of the shill bidding allegations against him and his company. And what I will say about Rick is that anytime he's been interviewed, that I've seen anyways, he seems to be a very reasonable and nice and almost like soft-spoken person. And a lot of the issues that, or a lot of the times that he's talked about the shill bidding issues, he mentions that they're limited in what they can do because of how eBay is set up, whether it's what consigners can do and also the infrastructure and design of how eBay is built. He is limited, and so it's kind of outside of his control. And to me, that suggests, if we take his words and those thoughts at face value, that a lot of the flack that he gets, it's not really his fault. And I'm kind of going with that. I'm just going to take him at face value. And that's why I think he's getting a lot of flack for stuff that isn't really his fault, if I'm being honest. The one thing, though, is if you are a Probstein detractor, you probably know by now that he is creating a new company called Snipe, and he's moving off of eBay. So we will see whether or not, if you are a Probstein detractor, quite quickly, whether or not, if he still has issues on the Snipe platform, whether or not it was eBay that was the problem or whether or not it was Probstein that was the problem. I believe that a lot of the hate or the negativity that is directed towards him is not really his fault. And if I'm being honest, I think a lot of the hate and, again, distaste for him has more to do with his name and his appearance, but that's just my personal opinion. And we will move right on to the last person, and that is Grant from Backyard Breaks. The fact that he is still around is amazing to me, but he is on this list because there will be people who say what he did a few months ago with his comments on his Whatnot stream, it was taken out of context, or it was like, it wasn't that bad. He didn't really mean it that way. And, he employs a bunch of people and he's doing good for the hobby. I actually wouldn't believe that these people exist, except for the fact that I've actually seen those comments. And comments like, well, what did he do that was really that bad? To me, that's wild. But there are people out there who think that. And so for that reason, he belongs on this list, because there is a portion of the hobby and a portion of the public that believes he has done good for the hobby. I'm not one of those people, if I'm just being honest. And so if you had me rank these 4 individuals in terms of which ones I like the most versus which ones I don't, it's like he's number 4 and it's not close. The other 3, you could kind of mix them in whatever order you want. And the thing for him that might just enrage you is the fact that even after all of the flack that he got, and the 3-month ban that or self-imposed exile, whatever you want to call it, that he had, a few months after that, PSA still decided to partner with Backyard Breaks for a live break at the PSA headquarters. And Neo Cards and Comics here talked about it. I still can't wrap my head around why PSA did this, given that it was only a few months afterwards. And if I worked at PSA, I'd be pretty ticked off if I don't know, were a person that had a daughter, had kids, anything, had any sense of taste. But here we are. Anyways, those are my 2 hobby Mount Rushmores. I would love to hear your comments, and I'm sure you have thoughts about who I should have included and who I didn't think of. I'm sure I missed people, but these were my thoughts on who they should be, who my Mount Rushmore should be for controversial figures and universal approval. Thank you, as always, for listening and watching. I'll talk to you all soon. Cheers.